The Red Sea is not just a body of water. It is the pressure valve of the global economy, where 40% of the world's oil and trillions in cargo pass through the Strait of Hormuz, a narrow choke point where a single act of war could collapse entire markets. And now, that act has happened. At the start of 2025, the Houthis, fighters from Yemen, armed and funded by Iran, crossed a line they cannot uncross. They attacked the USS Harry S. Truman, one of America's largest aircraft carriers, a floating fortress with over 5,000 sailors and dozens of combat aircraft. It patrolled the Red Sea to guarantee freedom of navigation. But the Houthis showed no fear. From the sands of Yemen, white smoke curled into the sky as missiles launched and drones screamed toward the Truman. They even claimed to shoot down a US MQ-9 Reaper drone over Marib using a homemade rocket, posting footage of wreckage and rising black smoke on Twitter. President Trump wasn't silent. Standing at the podium, his words cut through the silence like a blade. The day of retribution has arrived. The Houthis and Iran will feel the true wrath of America. A few hours later, the USS Carl Vinson was ordered into the Red Sea. Now, two American carriers, the Truman and the Vinson, sailed together in a strike formation not seen in years. From Diego Garcia, 6 B-2 Spirit bombers, nearly a third of America's stealth bomber fleet, were placed on high alert, engines primed, targets locked. Then the warning from Tehran. If America strikes Iran or our allies, an Iranian general said, Diego Garcia will be turned to ash, and the Strait of Hormuz will be closed. That threat changed everything. If Hormuz is closed, the lifeblood of the world economy stops flowing. Gas prices skyrocket. Supply chains collapse. Global panic. And so the world held its breath. The Houthis moved first. January 6, 2025. Sunset. The calm over the Red Sea shattered. Aboard, alarm sirens wailed. The radar flashed. Tiny, fast-moving dots raced toward the ship, hostile, and closing in fast. "Confirmed threat!" an officer shouted, his voice sharp with tension. Sailors rushed to battle stations, steel boots pounding the deck. The Houthis had launched C-802 cruise missiles and Shahed-136 drones in their boldest strike yet, aiming to overwhelm America's defenses. The C-802, flying just above the ocean surface, closed in fast with its 365-pound warhead. The Shahed drones, slower but packed with explosives, followed close behind, intended to knock out the Truman's radar aircraft and leave the fleet blind. But America was ready. USS Gravely locked on. C-802 missile bearing 270 degrees, the officer yelled. SM-2 missiles launched. An FA-18 Super Hornet screamed into the sky. 10 drones exploded in midair, fire raining over the sea. The first missile was vaporized, and the remaining missile? It veered off course and landed harmlessly in the water, dozens of miles from the Truman. The captain of the Gravely gave a single nod and said, "They missed. Not a scratch on us." It was a close call, but it was also a warning. The battle had begun. Smoke and boasts. The air above the Red Sea was calm once again, but the tension remained. On the decks of the USS Harry S. Truman and the Gravely, sailors stood down from battle positions, but their eyes stayed locked on the horizon. Nobody celebrated. Nobody relaxed. Everyone knew this was only the beginning. But in Yemen, the story was different. Not long after the failed missile attack, New footage began to spread across social media. It showed a smoking crater in the desert, twisted metal scattered across the sand, and men waving their rifles in celebration. The Houthis had found a target they could claim. A United States MQ-9 Reaper drone had been shot down over Marib province. To most, it was a small victory, but the Houthis treated it as a turning point. "We destroyed the American drone with our domestically built missiles," they wrote on their official channels. "This is proof that we can bring down their eyes. And soon, we will bring down their weapons, too." In the video, a group of fighters stood proudly beside the burning wreckage. The drone's blackened tail was barely recognizable. Plumes of smoke billowed into the sky behind them as they held up pieces of the downed aircraft like trophies. Across the world, headlines gathered pace. The footage was dramatic, but not everyone was impressed. At the Pentagon, the response was dismissive. One official spoke to reporters off camera. "They missed the Truman by miles. Now they are celebrating a drone kill as if they just sank a carrier. Let them have their moment. It will not last." Still, even a single Reaper drone lost is not without consequence. These machines provide real-time surveillance, target tracking, and even precision strikes. Losing one is a blow to operations in the region, especially when the enemy uses it as fuel for propaganda. And propaganda is what the Houthis do best. They know they cannot sink the Truman. They cannot wipe out an entire fleet. But that is not their goal. Their aim is symbolic. One successful hit, even if small, is enough to create the illusion of power. It is enough to rally supporters. It is enough to make Tehran proud. That is the danger. From the bridge of the Truman, sailors watched the coastline through binoculars and radar screens. They knew this was not about numbers. It was about perception. If the world saw the Houthis as weak, they would lose their platform. But if they landed even a single punch, they could claim victory in the eyes of their allies. That single drone was a headline for them. But for the United States, it was a spark. Not the kind that causes fear, but the kind that justifies everything that was coming next. The fuse had been lit. Now the question was, how far the flame would travel. While the Houthis posted videos and celebrated their drone kill, the real storm was building at sea. As the smoke over Yemen drifted into the sky, the USS Harry S. Truman remained unshaken. Its flight deck glowed under the red light of readiness. Its engines hummed like a beast waiting to be unleashed. But it no longer stood alone. Rising through the waves, the USS Carl Vinson arrived, another aircraft carrier, with a full wing of advanced fighter jets, early warning aircraft, and electronic warfare systems. Together, the USS Truman and USS Vinson formed a strike force unmatched by anything in the region. Two floating cities of steel, each armed with enough firepower to level military installations across a continent. They were not there for defense. They were there for dominance. Escorting them were destroyers and cruisers, built for precision and punishment. The USS Gettysburg, USS Stout, USS Jason Dunham, and USS Sullivan all joined the formation. Each carried a deadly mix of anti-aircraft missiles, ship killers, and Tomahawk cruise missiles designed to fly low and strike with pinpoint accuracy. In the Indian Ocean, the base of Diego Garcia stood ready. It looked quiet from above, but beneath the surface, preparations were underway. Inside its hangars sat 6 B-2 Spirit bombers, sleek, black, and silent. Each of them was loaded with guided bombs weighing several tons. These were not regular aircraft. They were designed for one purpose: to erase threats before they could speak. This group of 6 represented nearly 1/3 of the United States stealth bomber fleet. They were not placed here by accident. They were waiting for the signal. And that signal could come at any moment. On board the USS Gravely, the Aegis combat system scanned the skies, locking onto anything that moved within hundreds of miles. Its radar could see through weather, darkness, and electronic interference. Each screen glowed with data, tracking friendly aircraft and scanning for threats. Operators sat at their posts, watching in silence, hands ready to launch defensive missiles with a single tap. Beneath their feet, dozens of Tomahawk missiles sat sealed in vertical launch cells. Each one had a range of over 900 miles. Each one carried more than 1,000 pounds of explosives. Once fired, they would skim across the sea, turn sharply around mountains, and crash into targets before radar systems even knew what hit them. From the Truman's deck, FA-18 Super Hornets launched one after another, armed with guided bombs and long-range air-to-air missiles. Some carried JDAMs, which used satellite guidance to hit enemy bunkers from high altitude. Others flew on patrol, making sure no drone or cruise missile could get near. And in Washington, Trump made the message even clearer. He posted again, "The Houthis have been crushed every day. But this is only the beginning. Iran better back off or face consequences they cannot imagine." At the Pentagon, the mood was no longer cautious. It was resolute. The Houthis think they can mess with the United States. Using cheap drones and second-rate rockets, one defense official said during a closed session. Wait until they see what happens when the sky falls. The giant was no longer asleep, and when it moved, the world felt it. While American ships assembled in the Red Sea and fighter jets streaked through the skies, the true architect of the chaos remained unseen. The Houthis may have launched the missiles, but the fingerprints behind the operation were unmistakable. Each drone, each rocket, and each launch order echoed with influence from Tehran. This was never just a Houthi operation. This was a proxy war with Iran holding the strings. In the mountains of western Iran, buried deep beneath layers of concrete and steel, sit hidden weapons factories. From these underground locations, Tehran has quietly developed technologies and supplied them to partners across the region. Shahed drones, advanced radar jamming equipment, long-range missiles, all shipped piece by piece to their allies in Yemen. For years, Iran denied direct involvement, but now they were no longer hiding. General Amir Ali Hajizadeh, a senior commander in the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, stood before cameras in Tehran and made it clear. His face showed no fear. His voice was calm. His words were chilling. If the United States attacks, Diego Garcia will be turned to ash. The Strait of Hormuz will be closed. Not a single drop of oil will pass. It was not a bluff. The Strait of Hormuz is one of the most vital waterways on the planet. Its narrow corridor connects the oil-rich Persian Gulf to the open sea. If Iran were to sink even a few tankers or scatter sea mines, the result would be instant. Oil shipments would grind to a halt. Prices would skyrocket. The global economy would fall into panic. The United States knew it. So did Europe. And Iran knew that they knew. On social media, the Houthis mocked American firepower. "You cannot stop us," they posted. But the bravado was hollow. Everyone knew who was really speaking. The message came from Tehran, wrapped in a Yemeni flag, and the weapons kept coming. The new model of Shahed drone, known as the Shahed 1-3-6B, had recently been spotted in the region. Unlike its older version, this one had an extended range. Theoretically, it could reach Diego Garcia. It was slow, vulnerable to interception, and easily shot down. But the mere fact that Iran would consider it meant something had changed. They were no longer thinking about skirmishes. They were thinking about reach. Far out in the Indian Ocean, Russian warships quietly appeared. The RFS Rescue and the RFS Older moved into international waters within observation distance of Diego Garcia. They did not engage. They did not threaten. They simply watched. It was the kind of presence that delivered a message without saying a word. Back in Moscow, Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov addressed the situation bluntly. "An American attack on Iran would be catastrophic. We strongly advise restraint." But was it truly advice? Or was it a warning? And what about Europe? NATO allies were not sitting still. From the Mediterranean Sea, the Italian destroyer Federico Martino and the Greek frigate HS Hydra joined the French carrier group led by the FS Charles de Gaulle. As they sailed into the Gulf of Aden, the message was unmistakable. They stood with the United States, at least for now. In Washington, intelligence agencies delivered more disturbing reports. Iran was increasing its stockpile of enriched uranium. The number stood at 275 kilograms, enough material to build a nuclear weapon if they made the decision. The chants from the streets of Tehran grew louder. "Death to America! Death to Israel!" No longer slogans. Now, a signal of intent. And hovering above it all, silent and patient, were the B-2 bombers at Diego Garcia. If Iran crossed one more line, they would not need to guess what came next. The United States was watching. Europe was moving. Russia was circling. And Iran was growing bolder by the hour. The match had been lit, but the one holding the matchbox was still standing in the shadows. At 2 o'clock in the morning on January 8, 2025, the war entered a new phase. The smoke from the earlier Houthi strike had long faded over the Red Sea, but in the skies above Yemen, something far more dangerous was about to begin. There were no warning shots, no press conferences, no delay. This was not a response. This was retribution. On board the USS Harry S. Truman, the red glow of combat readiness lit every corridor. Alarm sirens blared across the flight deck. Every sailor moved with practiced urgency. There was no panic, only preparation. This was what they trained for. Prepare for air launch. Target coordinates locked. Strike package ready. The voice echoed over the loudspeaker. In orbit above, American satellites had been scanning the terrain of Yemen for days. They had mapped out launch sites hidden under rock formations, identified command centers disguised as civilian buildings, and tracked communications traffic across desert roads. The MQ-9 Reaper that the Houthis had downed had a twin in the sky. It was circling silently above northern Yemen, its high-resolution camera capturing every detail of a launch site tucked near the city of Sada. Below, a man sprinted from a truck. The drone followed him, recording his every step. Near the coast, the RC-1-3-5 rivet joint gathered radio transmissions and encrypted messages. The battlefield was being drawn in complete silence. Then came the order. At 2:05 in the morning, the destroyers USS Gravely and USS Stout launched their first volley. 12 Tomahawk cruise missiles fired one after another, their engines screaming as they disappeared into the night. These were not random shots. Each rocket carried over 1,000 pounds of explosives and was programmed to fly low, skimming terrain, twisting around obstacles, and detonating with deadly precision. From the Truman's flight deck, FA-18 Super Hornets roared into the sky. They climbed quickly, their wings heavy with JDAM bombs and air-to-ground missiles. These were not warning tools. These were earth-shattering weapons designed to penetrate deep into enemy bunkers and detonating with devastating force. By 2:38, the first Tomahawks reached their targets. The explosions lit up the desert like a thunderstorm. A major Houthi command center was obliterated. Surveillance footage had shown walls collapsing and fire consuming the facility within seconds. Just minutes later, a weapons storage depot ignited. Flames shot into the air. Secondary explosions followed as C-802 missiles and Shahed drones were caught in the blast. Then came the jets. The FA-18s dropped their bombs through thick clouds of smoke. The JDAM struck hardened targets with bone-crushing force. The desert floor shook. Fireballs rose into the sky. Ground-level video captured massive shock waves tearing across the earth. Inside one of the cockpits, a pilot radioed back to command. "Target eliminated. Nothing left. We are seeing only ash and fire." On the bridge of the USS Truman, officers watched satellite feeds and infrared scans. The mission was unfolding exactly as planned. Every hit was calculated, every target confirmed. This was not an attempt to weaken the Houthis. This was an effort to erase them. The command base in Saada had been wiped out. The ammunition depots around Marib were leveled. Radar systems, launch pads, logistics routes, all destroyed in a matter of minutes. It was fast, it was brutal, and it was not finished. President Trump returned to social media with a message that rang like a thunderclap. "The Houthis have been crushed. Their weapons are gone. Iran, you are next if you dare." The Pentagon issued its own report hours later, confirming the scale of the attack. Dozens of critical targets had been struck. Satellite images backed it up. Where there had once been infrastructure, there were only smoking craters. One of the pilots, speaking under anonymity, summed it up with precision. "I watched the bunker go up like a volcano." There was no second chance. Nobody made it out. For the Houthis, it was a disaster. Their carefully constructed web of launch facilities and command points had been shattered. Their leaders had gone silent. And the desert that once gave them cover now gave them away. But even as the damage became undeniable, a new post appeared from one of their official accounts. "You have achieved nothing. We will not stop until we are erased." The statement was short. It tried to sound defiant, but it landed like a whisper in the smoke. The world had watched what happened when the United States responded, and it was only beginning. By morning on January 8, 2025, black smoke continued to rise from the Yemeni desert. The fire had not faded. It had only spread. From the command center aboard the USS Harry S. Truman, Real-time footage showed exactly what had happened overnight. Dozens of strikes had hit with pinpoint accuracy. The terrain was now marked with impact craters and burned vehicles. What was once a network of bunkers and launch pads had been turned into a flattened graveyard. Beside the Truman stood the USS Carl Vinson, its gray hull glinting in the rising sun. Together, the two aircraft carriers floated side by side, an iron formation that sent a silent message to anyone watching. The Houthis had been hit hard. C-802 missiles, gone. Shahed drones, incinerated. High-ranking commanders, missing. Their voice online remained, but only as a ghost of what it once was. "We will not stop," they wrote again on social media. But this time the message did not go viral. It was ignored. The footage of American jets returning from their mission, the satellite images showing destroyed compounds, and the reports from global media had already drowned them out. Trump posted on Twitter, "The Houthis have been crushed. Maritime freedom has been secured." But once the smoke began to clear, it was obvious that the situation hadn't fully settled. The Houthis may have lost ground, but the broader conflict was still developing, and it was never just about them in the first place. What their attacks revealed was a practical problem for the United States and its allies. Using relatively low-cost drones and missiles, the Houthis forced the world's strongest military to respond with far more expensive equipment. Every drone intercepted came with a price tag that dwarfed the cost of what was being launched. Aegis missile systems, FA-18 patrols, Tomahawks, and advanced radar, all activated to counter weapons built at a fraction of the cost. One sailor aboard the USS Gravely summed it up quietly. "We're using a wrecking ball to chase flies." And now, with their launch sites destroyed and their equipment mostly eliminated, the Houthis are left with little more than online statements. Their latest post read, "We will not stop." But that statement carries far less weight than it did a week ago. For now, the immediate threat from Yemen has been neutralized. But the real challenge still comes from further east. Iran. The country continues to support armed groups across the region and has avoided direct conflict so far. But according to multiple intelligence briefings, Iran's weapons development continues. Most concerning are the growing reserves of enriched uranium, over 600 pounds as of the latest reports. That amount is considered dangerously close to what would be needed for a functional nuclear weapon. And if a strike ever did occur on Iranian territory, there's no doubt that the Strait of Hormuz would become a primary target in their retaliation. That narrow stretch of sea between Iran and Oman handles around 40% of the world's oil shipments. If Iran moved to block it, either with naval action or by mining the waters, it would send shockwaves through global energy markets. Even a temporary closure could cause fuel prices to spike worldwide and trigger economic disruption. Iranian officials have issued private warnings about this possibility. Military leaders have been quoted as saying, "If the United States hits Iran directly, oil will stop moving." Whether that's a bluff or a serious position remains to be seen. At Diego Garcia, the U.S. military is preparing for both scenarios. 6 B-2 bombers are now on standby, ready to launch missions within hours. These aircraft are equipped with weapons capable of striking hardened facilities. If needed, they could target Iranian nuclear sites before they become operational. Meanwhile, Iran's newer generation of drones, including the Shahed 136B, could theoretically reach Diego Garcia. Most military experts believe they would be shot down well before impact. Yet, the fact that Iran is testing that range shows how much further this conflict could go. Russia is also present in the background. Two of their warships, the RFS Rescue and the RFS Older, have moved into international waters near the region. So far they've stayed quiet. No direct involvement, no aggressive moves. But they are close enough to monitor everything. Back in Moscow, Russian leadership remains silent but informed. After years of conflict in Ukraine and continued tension with NATO, the Kremlin is keeping a close eye on American moves. No one is certain how far they would go to intervene, if at all. European nations have also increased their presence. French, Greek, and Italian ships are now sailing in the Gulf of Aden. Officially, they are there to protect international shipping lanes. The Red Sea is still tense. There may not be airstrikes tonight. The headlines may shift, but the conditions for escalation remain in place. The Strait of Hormuz remains a strategic flashpoint. Iran's nuclear program remains active. Russia's naval presence adds pressure, and the United States shows no signs of stepping back. This particular military operation is over. However, the larger conflict is still active. It has simply changed location, and whatever comes next will determine how this standoff evolves or ends. Will Iran cross the line? Will the United States strike first? Will a third party light the next spark? The Red Sea is quiet for now, but the situation is far from resolved. Thanks for watching. Feel free to like, subscribe, and comments are always welcome. Get yourself involved.